I've started in on the passenger side, replacing the floorboard on the passenger side. That hole you see right there, the one I'm putting my foot into, that's actually where the heater core goes on these Studebakers. It runs under the seat. Anyhow, I wanted to show you the process that I use to make patches. The floor pans that I ordered don't span the entire width that I need covered. They don't go from the rocker all the way to the good metal on the transmission tunnel. The floor pans that I bought stop right where this pink line is. Obviously, I've got some weak metal to the left of that I was going to have to fill in. Can't weld into this stuff because it's too thin. So what I've been doing is using poster board. I lay the poster board in exactly the area that I want to make the patch. One advantage of using poster board for your template is it's very easy to determine where you need to cut stress relief marks in the metal to make it bend easier and to make it have the shape that you want it to have. And this actually overlaps about an inch to make sure that I'm not accidentally cutting something too short. Once I get the poster board the size and shape that I need, I bring it over and lay it on a piece of flat 18 gauge steel, draw the lines exactly the shape of the poster board, and then I end up cutting out something like this. You can see with the relief marks here in the same places that they were on the poster board. Alright, so that's what the patch looks like after it's been sort of molded into the spot where it's going to go. Basically just involves smacking it with a hammer in the right places. Looks like that's going to fit in there really nicely. I got a little tweaking to do on the bottom end here. Outlined approximately where the bends are going to have to be with some masking tape. Now I'll put it on the vise and just gently tap it over into this shape here with this little lip on it. There's the patch welded in. Well, at least the top, bottom, and left-hand side. The right-hand side will mate up with the floor pan that I ordered. Alright, so I bolted this brace in here. I'm cutting away a little more metal on this side than I did on the other side, a little more structure. I may add another brace or two before it's all said and done. The point of this is I don't want to lose the door gaps, cause anything to sag, and then weld it together out of alignment or something like that. Okay, so the old floor is cut out of the passenger side. Next up is wire wheeling, sanding, rust convertering, priming as needed, and painting the bits of the frame and the floor braces that are exposed. The floor braces are going to need a little bit of patching here too. Alright, you can see I've added another brace diagonally, and I'll be adding another one laterally, as I plan to remove the rocker panel and it's what's left of the floor there. I didn't have to do this on the driver's side, so I didn't really need all these braces. I was able to maintain the door gaps just fine, but I'm afraid if I don't add all these braces, I'll lose the door gap on this side. As you can see, I've made another patch, this time to cover this floor brace. I had the upper section of this floor brace was very thin. It had a lot of holes in it. I just decided to replace the whole thing. I measured the good metal. I know these braces are made out of 16 gauge sheet metal. It measures 1.6 millimeters, which is 16 gauge sheet metal. So that's what my replacement sheet metal is as well, 16 gauge. And that's going to go in there. We'll spot weld where you see all the holes drilled. I've cleaned everything up already. We'll spot weld along here. And then I'll come back along and tack weld along the edges as much as I can. We'll tack weld along the edges here. It should make for a pretty strong repair. And there's the patch welded in. This is the underside of the patch that we just showed the top side of. I tack welded along the edges for the additional rigidity that adds. So here's that same patch, primed, seam sealed, and painted. I am pleased with the way that one turned out. So we've got another brace with a little weak spot in it right there in the middle. Again, it's solid on the ends. And as you get toward the middle, it gets thin and weak. I'm sure you had water and mud got trapped under there and rusted out that center part. The sides, totally solid, 100% 16 gauge solid. And the ends are also totally solid, but this middle part necessitated making a patch, and it occurred to me I hadn't really shown you how I get those bends in there. I don't have any fancy metal brake or anything like that, just this tiny little bench vise. And once I've got the line established where I want the thing to bend, I just stick it in there and tap on it with a regular old hammer, a little bit at a time. Just do this over and over until I get not big heavy taps, but just little taps. Get one piece done, slide it over, tighten up the vise, do it again. That's essentially the brace made. That'll fit right in there really nice. But I still want to put some metal in this piece here because where it bends, you don't want that flexing. I'm going to cut out a little piece of metal to go right in this triangle. I'm going to weld it in, and that'll add the strength to that bend right there. First step is just lay it on a clean piece of sheet metal and draw where you need to cut. Sorry, I missed taking a video of cutting it out, but that's our little piece. I'm going to clean that up a little bit with the grinder, and we'll weld it in. Alright, so I took a couple of passes at this little piece with the grinder, just to refine the shape a little bit, and as you can see now, I have an almost perfect piece to fill in that gap. There you go, that patch is done. Let's see how it fits in the car. Alright, there's a shot again of the brace that needs the patch. And there's the patch that we just made. I just wanted to show you, you can do this at home. You don't need special tools, you don't need metal brakes. I did this with a standard hammer and a standard small bench vise. This is the floor brace reinforcement patch we just made. You can see I've drawn on it where I want to drill the holes for the spot welds after laying it on top of the floor brace to make sure I wasn't going to be drilling into any weak spots in the floor brace. It'll go completely around and you can see we're going to be doing spot welds on the top and on the side. So the next step with these is just to dress up these holes a little bit to remove the sharp edges of metal, but also to remove the contaminants like paint or primer or grease that would affect the weld, make for a weaker weld. So we want it to be nice and clean right around the holes where the spot welds are going to be. We'll do this with a Dremel. So now I'm just marking the spots on the floor brace below that need to be cleaned up, just like we did the patch here. Take those pieces down to shiny bare metal too, again, to make sure there's no contaminants in the weld that would make for a lousy weld. A couple of them are a little ugly, but it's going in okay. They're looking decent. They're strong. Alright, this is after I hit it with the grinder. This was 16 gauge metal, mated to 16 gauge metal, so it is one sturdy, solid piece. Right there, that's where the soft spot was. You can see there's no more soft spot. So I guess I was stressing out a little bit, worrying about how I was going to fix the structure in this A-pillar. But after I thought about it and poked around, it occurred to me you fix it just like you fix the rest of the sheet metal on the car. You keep cutting until you figure out where the good metal starts, and once you know where the good metal starts, you just got to build a patch to fill in where the bad metal ends. So that's essentially what I'm doing here. It's going to take probably 3 or 4 separate patches and then an outer layer. Everything's going to be 16 gauge, so I'll essentially have 16 gauge doubled up in here, which is probably essential for the strength that's required for this part of the car. Here's the patch I came up with. You can see how nicely that fits in there. I wanted to quickly show you guys how the floors on these Studebakers interact with the rocker panel and the A-pillar. It's a little bit different than what you'd see on a GM or Ford or something like that. On a GM, you'd see the rocker panel as its own separate piece that would be welded to the floor. On the Studebakers, the main structure part, the boxed part that provides all the strength, is actually part of the floor pan itself, and it actually slides under this tab on the A-pillar, goes on the outside of this part of the floor brace, goes on the outside of this part of the floor brace where it gets tack welded. So there's tack welds here and here, here and here, here and here, and that holds the floor to the structure of the A-pillar. I didn't have to deal with any of this on the other side. On the driver's side, the structure was in a lot better shape, so I just welded the floor to the top of the old piece of floor. It was in such good condition I didn't want to go ripping it out. But I didn't get so lucky here on the passenger side, so I had to basically cut out all the old floor pan, including up in here under the A-pillar, and the part that goes around the floor brace, and I'm going to be pounding this in as far as it'll go. I'm not going to be able to get this in all the way because I'm just using one hand, but you can see it goes up in there like that. It'll go in about another 1.5 to 2 inches, and then spot welded here, spot welded here, spot welded here, and spot welded up in there. And that'll hold that all together. And then the structure that I have that goes in the A-pillar will get welded to the floor also. So I finally have my passenger side floor pan started in. Got all the welds done that form the structure along the edge that meet up with the rocker panel. That was a big deal. Allowed me to get rid of all the bracing that I had bolted in there that was keeping the door gap, or making sure I had the... And as you can see, I've got the door back on to test the door gap. Door lines up exactly the same as it did before I started cutting everything out, so I'm pretty pleased with that. Anyhow, like I said, we got this started welded in. There was let me show you up front first. Up front, as I explained before, it slips under the A-pillar, goes over the top of the floor brace in there, so you've got spot welded to the A-frame, or to the A-pillar here, spot welded to the A-pillar here. And then on the inside, you've got about 6 spot welds holding it to the floor brace, 2 here and 4 of them up in here. So that should be a solid piece there. And then in the back, I left about 8 inches of the original floor that was still very solid. It was pretty much like brand new metal back here still, just to make it easy on myself. And then I slid the new floor pan underneath that. And as you can see, I've got it spot welded there. Spot welded there, spot welded there, spot welded there, and then tack welded along the edges. So that's quite sturdy and quite solid. The next thing to do will be to weld the outer rocker. One of the trickiest parts of installing this outer rocker panel is getting it fitted in there so that there's not a weird door gap, like it would be too big on one side and too small on the other side. I'm talking about the door gap, or the gap between the door and the rocker panel right here. So I've got it attached with a screw there temporarily, and of course I've got a clamp holding it up on the front, and I've been moving it around 1 millimeter at a time, just getting it in the position that I'm going to weld it in before I put a single weld into it. I think I might have to move it forward just another tiny fraction, probably less than 1 millimeter. But I've got the door gap pretty consistent from front to back. It's a little bit bigger in the front, but that's just because this isn't tacked up in there yet. Once that gets tacked up in there, that'll be perfect. Like I said, I'm going to slide it forward just a hair, just to narrow this up just a tiny bit. Here's what that looks like welded in. You can see I did spot welds every about 1.5 inches. All the way down. And then there's some tack welds up behind there holding it in on the ends on each side. But I'm very pleased with the way that this rocker panel turned out. I probably should have just done this on the other side. I opted to patch the other one. It was in much better shape than this side, but it really was not that big of a deal to put that rocker panel in. So I've included some clips of welding previously, but I haven't really shown you the technique I'm using for cutting out the old metal. I'm not overlapping any of the metal. There's just a couple of places that are overlapped, but the main floor patch, the main floor pan isn't overlapped. It's being butt welded. And I'm taking the cutting wheel, cutting out about a 1/16 inch gap, doing about 4 or 5 inches at a time. Cut the gap, make sure the edges line up, and then welding it in. I'll show you a video of that here. You can see I'm cutting right next to where I just finished welding. I put about a 1/16 inch gap in with the cutting wheel. And I'm just going to make sure that these edges are flush before I start welding, or get them as close to flush as I can. I use a very thin screwdriver for that. And I just tap on it with the hammer a little bit where it's sticking up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be more or less flush. So what this 1/16 inch gap does is it cuts away the metal that I'm going to take out, and basically you're left with this piece of metal butt welded to this piece of metal, and the old metal that was underneath here is pulled away underneath. But anyhow, you can see that's welding up very nicely. Since I'm working on the floor, I'm not all that worried about warping. There's going to be a little bit of warping because I'm keeping the metal pretty hot to make sure the weld penetrates quite well. We're not being as careful as we would be if it was an outer body panel. Alright, that's looking pretty good, I think. We'll just keep doing that until this entire panel is welded in. We'll cut a little more here. Alright, so we're a little farther along on this now, and the welds are turning out pretty good. I just wanted to show you this is the piece that came out from underneath when I'm making that 16th inch cut. This is what's being cut away, and we're butt welding this and this together. But this is actually dropping away and being left out. So the passenger side floor pan is almost all the way welded in. You can see I put some cardboard boxes up here just to protect my firewall from getting the sparks on it and possibly causing a fire. As you can see, I'm going to have to make a patch down here, which, just like I did on the driver's side, the floor pans that I ordered don't span all the way to the wall, so I'm going to have to make a patch to fill that in. I did have to make a patch to put in here, just basically the same process that was used on the driver's side. I apologize, I didn't get any video of the making or installing of that patch, but the same techniques were used that were used on all the other patches I've made so far. Basically just a paper template first, get the exact shape you want, lay it over the metal, cut the metal, and then kind of tap it in the way it needs to go. This is butt welded here. It bends down at a 90-degree angle, and it gets spot welded down underneath the car there. This is the underside of the same patch I just showed you. This is the one that extends the floor pan all the way over to the edge where it can be welded. So where it attaches to the floor pan, that's actually butt welded. And then you can see it bends here at a 90-degree angle, and there's spot welds along down here. So this is the bottom of the A-pillar, where the A-pillar connects to the floor. This is a good, sturdy, strong connection here. And of course, I put this patch in here to make this connect all the way down to the floor brace. But I want to put one more piece in here to give it some extra strength. So I've got some 16-gauge sheet metal that I bought for the floor braces. I thought that would be just the thing. So I made this, and this is going to get spot welded in here and here. Tack welded down here at the bottom. Because it's a 16-gauge piece, it's very, very thick. And the fact that it has these bends in it on the sides gives it sort of a little bit extra strength there too. And there's that welded in. That 16-gauge piece with those two bends in it adds a lot of strength to this A-pillar. That's what I was looking to do. I had to cut some metal out of there, and I just wanted to make sure that there's plenty of strength connecting the A-pillar down to the floor brace, which is of course connected to the frame. So there's going to be one more patch that goes in here. It's essentially just going to be a cover that's going to cover all of this up, so none of this will actually be visible, but I'll know it's there, and it'll give me peace of mind knowing that that strength is in there. And now I'm going to show you the cover that I made to cover everything up. That should look pretty nice when I get that welded in there. And there's that patch welded in. I don't know if you can see it or not. There's about a half a dozen pinholes I got to go back and fix, but I'm getting kind of tired, so I'm going to save that for another day. Okay, a quick clip of the footwell that goes in the rear seat passenger side area. I just got done preparing it to be welded in. I drilled all the holes for the spot welds and then sanded off the sharp edges. On the back side that was painted, I took away the paint so that won't contaminate the weld, and just cleaned out the holes really good. So that's prepped and ready to get welded in. That's the footwell welded in. I'll hit this with a grinder just really lightly just to get rid of some of the little beads of slag. I don't know if you can see them, but and maybe smooth out the tops of some of these sharp welds. But the spot welds turned out pretty decent. We're getting close to the end. Really just a couple of jobs left to do on this. I've got to trim this out, put the heater core in there, make sure everything lines up right and fits in there snug. And then back here, this is the rear interior of the car. I've got some weak metal right here. I don't know exactly how extensive it is, but I suspect it's very similar to what I had on the driver's side. So I'm prepared for a job like that right now. I'm just chipping away all the old seam sealer, finding out where the bad metal stops and the good metal starts. Once I get that figured out, I'll cut a hole, make a patch, weld in the patch. Probably will have to do some patching on the floor brace underneath there, just like I did on the driver's side. We're looking at the spot directly underneath the floor in the rear of the car where I just showed you a minute ago. This is the floor brace I was talking about that I thought I might have to patch. I cleaned it up with a wire wheel just to see what I was working with, and I don't see any rust through it all, so I may have actually lucked out on the side. Well, I'm pleasantly surprised. I cut out the floor that was weak. The good metal actually starts pretty close in, and that floor brace isn't rusted at all. A little bit of surface rust on there I was able to clean up with a wire wheel, but it's not weak. Does not require a patch, so I'll chalk that up as one in the win column. I'll trim that up a little bit and refine it so it fits that space a little better. But basically that's the patch that's going to go in there. And there's that patch welded in. I apologize, I forgot to get a shot of this before I sprayed primer all over it. But you get the idea, I'm sure. This opening where the heater core goes, I got it cut out, roughed out. I'm going to do a little more refining of it, but this is the cradle that holds the heater core. You can see that fits down in there nicely. There's some weather stripping that goes around the edges of the thing, but it basically just screws down. Success! The entire floor is installed in this 56 Studebaker Powerhawk. Part of me thought this day would never come. It took twice as long as it was supposed to take. I ended up having to patch a lot of the floor braces, which I hadn't really expected. I should have known better. I should have known that was going to be the case. But anyhow, it's done now. And if I do say so myself, it's not a bad job. It's not a professional job, but it's not a crap job either. I can tell you what, it's solid. Should keep this car on the road for many, many years to come. And here's the underside. I don't have it up on a lift, so it is a little bit difficult to film this, but I'll do the best job I can to give you an idea what it looks like down here. Generally speaking, I'm pretty pleased with the way it turned out down here as well. At some point down the road, I am going to come back and finish off this frame. Well, I had the floor out of it. Basically, I just took care of the areas that were exposed when the floor was out of it, the upper surfaces, because I knew that would probably be my only chance to get them. But at some point in a future project, I'm going to take care of the frame as well, the rest of the frame and the rest of the floor that wasn't exposed. But I'm pretty pleased with what I've done so far. That's all I got for you on this project.